Okay, everybody. Hello, this is FLEA Market Fantasy number 22. As always, this is your co-host, Mike-DELL, and as always, I'm joined by...
Mike-DELL of the LCS Hockey Radio Show.
That's right, and this week, it is once again my pick. And so I have gone into the annals of 80s DC Comics, and I've picked an early issue of Saga of the Swamp Thing by Alan Moore and others. And
I have no experience with the Swamp Thing. I've never read a Swamp Thing comic book. I have no concept of the Swamp Thing. Okay. I know they made a terrible movie in 1982. With,
and then a terrible sequel as well.
Oh, see, I didn't even know they made a sequel.
Yeah, in 1989, like a month after Batman came out, or a month before. Yeah, no one saw it.
Oh, all right. Fair enough. So I was actually looking forward to this. I get to experience some Swamp Thing.
Now, my other question is, have you ever read an Alan Moore comic?
Watchmen.
Okay.
That's it, though.
Are you a fan of Watchmen?
Yeah, I think it's really, really good. Okay. I don't know if it's like, the greatest thing ever people make it out to be, but it's really good, yeah.
Well, then one day we'll have to talk about what you do think is the greatest thing that's ever been made.
Howard the Duck.
Okay. The movie, not the comic, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Born Again's my favorite thing. Daredevil Born Again.
You know what? I gotta say, Alan Moore's my favorite writer, but if you're talking about 80s, then Frank Miller, especially in Born Again, is gotta be right up there.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a good story. And you've never read Batman Year One?
No.
Wow. Okay, I know it's on my list. Anyway,
good Lord.
Get back to the comic. Okay,
I was just checking while we were talking. I was thinking, it's one of your picks. And I'm like, was Batman in this? Because the Justice League do show up, but I'm looking through. Batman doesn't make an appearance, right?
That's true. No, he doesn't.
Yeah, thank God. Because it's like we have Batman every fucking week on this show. Let's get rid of the Batman.
The Batman podcast.
He always weasels his way in somehow.
Yeah.
Like I think we're episode 22. We've had at least 5 Batman issues.
That might be an exaggeration. I was actually kind of expecting to be in this one too. I forgot. I guess he wasn't in the league at this time.
Because we had Brave and the Bold with Batman and Superman. Then we had that Batman comic, Michael Golden drew. Then my buddy Miles picked a Batman special.
Right.
We had the Christmas thing with Batman in it.
Okay.
And Infinite Crisis. Batman was in that.
Crisis on Infinite Earths. Well, he had a cameo, but I mean...
But he's in there.
Okay. I
got to look at Batman again.
So that's 1/5 of our episodes about?
Well, closer to 1/4, but yeah, I don't want to get into
I'm not good at math.
Yeah, I don't want to... Maybe you're on the metric system up there in Canada. I don't want to complain, but whatever.
Okay.
All right, anyway. This week, we're talking Swamp Thing. That's the point of all this. And again, Michael, I knew nothing about Swamp Thing, so I did some research.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Now, do you know where Swamp Thing made his first appearance?
Okay. Is it House of something?
Yes, it is a House of something. House of Secrets, number 92.
Right.
From 1971.
Right. Okay.
Now, what did you make us read? You made us read a dopey comic book. Was that House of Mystery?
That was House of Mystery.
Okay. All right. House of Mystery. All right, so House of Secrets. And how many House comics did DC have? That's the big question.
Yeah.
1971. Now, his origin in that story was a little different.
Right.
It was a little different. Do you remember what it was?
Well, I know that they redid the origin. It's very confusing because the next appearance of Swamp Thing, as far as I know, has a different origin, right?
Yes.
So he was Alex Olsen, right?
I think that was his name.
Yeah.
The big difference was, like, in that first one, it was a one-shot story there, and it was like a love triangle, and one guy murdered his buddy to steal the girl, and then they end up getting married, but he threw his buddy in the swamp, and then he became the Swamp Thing somehow.
Okay.
And then he came back to life to get revenge on his buddy for stealing his girl.
Okay.
That's basically the premise. So
okay.
So then Swamp Thing Volume 1, Number 1 in 1972, he gets his own series. Mm-hmm. And in that one, do you know the origin of that one?
Well, he's doing an experiment with some chemicals or whatever, and then some bad guys come into his office or whatever it is out in the swamp, and I can't remember why, but something goes wrong, and there ends up a fire starts, right? And then he runs away to get away from the fire, and he falls into the swamp, right?
Yes, basically. But the guy's name was Alec Holland.
Right.
And his wife, Linda Holland. They're both scientists. And they're doing this top secret research on a biorestorative formula.
Okay.
And the idea was that this formula could make even barren land produce food.
Okay.
So it would like end world hunger. And so while they're doing their research in this barn near a swamp in the Louisiana bayou, because they were put there as like kind of like a safe house to protect them. No one knows they're there, except some bad guys find them anyway. And the bad guys come up and they're like, "Hey, we want to buy your formula. Here's all the money. You know, we want to give us the formula." And Alec Holland, a man of principle, says, "No, I am not going to sell you my formula." And he says, "You get out of here, you creeps." But they knock him out. They knock him out. And while he's out, you don't see what's going on with his wife. But then he wakes up and he sees there's a bomb taped to the underside of his work table.
Okay.
And it like sticks of dynamite. And he goes to get the bomb and it blows up. And because I guess the bad guys were told if you can't buy the formula from him, make sure you destroy it.
Okay.
So his lab blows up and he's caught on fire.
Okay.
And his body's ripped to shreds and he's running, out of the lab. I'm on fire. And he runs into the swamp. And because his body is covered with this biorestorative formula, it interacts with the swamp and it turns him into Swamp Thing.
Right.
And then when he comes out of the swamp, he goes back to the lab. He discovers that they had also killed his wife. And he is not happy about this. So he has to go get revenge. And he also wants to try and get back to being human. That's like the motivation. Get revenge and to be human again, I guess.
Right. Now, can I interject? Are you going to mention the Man-Thing?
No.
Okay, because the Man-Thing came out, I believe, only a month earlier from Marvel, and he has almost exactly the same origin, okay?
Really?
Yes. And the thing that makes it even more hilarious is that Swamp Thing was created by Len Wein, okay? And the Man-Thing was created by Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway. But one of those two, I don't remember which one, was roommates with Len Wein. Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
So, it's insane, I know. And I can't remember which one it was, but basically they're like, there's no way it can't be a coincidence. These guys are roommates. And so I think DC was going to sue Marvel or vice versa. I'm not sure which one came out first, but one of them was going to sue the other, but they didn't. So.
Wow, yeah, because I totally forgot Man-Thing existed. But yeah, I should have researched that. Yeah, Man-Thing was like Marvel's equivalent. And Man-Thing looked a little different. He kind of looked like, I don't know. I seem to remember him. Did he have a trunk?
Yes, he had like 3 trunks, actually.
Yeah, like around his eyes, they hang down from his face. And
yeah. And just for the record, sorry, it was Jerry Conway. So the Len Wein written Man-Thing story appeared in between. Oh, wait a minute. Len Wein wrote both of them.
What?
Hold on. So Jerry Conway created Man-Thing, but then Len Wein wrote both of them. This is bizarre.
He wrote both of them for the same DC and Marvel at the same time?
DC and Marvel, yeah. Like literally like a month apart. Oh, sorry. It was okay. So here's an actual quote. Let me just get the quote so I'm not like just talking out of my hat here. So the Wein written Man-Thing story appeared in between Wein's first and second version of his DC character. So as you mentioned, there was the House of Secrets. Then there was the Swamp Thing #1, right? And then here, so then Len Wein says, Jerry Conway and I thought that unconsciously the origin of Swamp Thing was a bit too similar to the origin of Man-Thing a year and a half earlier. So Man-Thing was first, I guess.
Wait, I thought you said Man-Thing came between the 2 incarnations of Swamp Thing.
I think what he says when it's too similar is that the origin in the second version of Swamp Thing was too similar to the origin of Man-Thing, yeah.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Very confused,
So Swamp Thing came first, but the origin of the Swamp Thing, the second Swamp Thing, was derivative of the Man-Thing, which came between the 2 Swamp Things.
Exactly. It's not confusing at all,
This is like Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Exactly. Okay, so
Let me ask you this: if Man Thing walks into Swamp Thing, and they know are they the same guy? It's like the same thing again. Yeah, but Man Thing, it never really reached the same popularity as Swamp Thing, right?
No.
Yeah.
I think it's partly because he couldn't talk.
Oh.
Yeah, he had no voice. He would just like interact with people, and when he touched them, they would burn if they experienced any fear. So it was kind of a limited character, you know.
Wait a minute. He touched people, and if they were scared, they burned.
Yes, that's his power. It sounds silly when you say it out loud, doesn't it?
It almost sounds like this is a character represents a sexual abuser. That he's grooming.
Yeah, you can say that. You can say that.
But also about it's also very similar to Ghost Rider. He would burn the evil people.
Right, with his penance there, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Wow. This is wild, wild stuff. I always like to research old comic book characters because it sends you down these rabbit holes.
Oh, I know.
Connected, and it's very strange. But yeah, I had no idea Len Wein was responsible for both Swamp Thing and Man Thing. All right, so anyway, then Swamp Thing, he ended that first run that started in 1972, but then they brought him back with Volume 2 of Swamp Thing. Although technically, it's what we're reading today is the Saga of the Swamp Thing.
Right.
That's the official title of this series, and it started in 1982. But then I guess around like maybe issue 39 or something, they just switched it to Swamp Thing again.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So now that series started off with the same origin as the Volume 1 series.
Mm-hmm.
But, Mike-DELL, what happened? Alan Moore came in issue 20, and what did he do to the origin?
Well, he came in, it's funny because most people forget this. He had one issue first where he wrapped up all the subplots from the previous writer. And then he did his issue, the famous issue, The Anatomy Lesson, which is where he revised his origin. Do you know what the revised origin is?
Yes. Basically, well, you go ahead and explain it.
Well, and this is all based on memory, but basically he learns that Alec Holland actually died and that he is just a plant with the memories of Alec Holland that thinks he's Alec Holland. And that's basically it.
Yes. He's like an earth elemental.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess the best way to describe it, really, like the mystical creatures that protect the earth, maybe?
That's right, yeah.
And there's been like hundreds or thousands of them throughout history, and he's just one of them. But he was a living embodiment of the swamp, and when Alec Holland's body fell into the swamp and died, he absorbed his consciousness somehow.
Right.
And he took on all his memories. So this monster elemental creature thought he was Alec Holland, but in reality, he was not.
Exactly.
So that's an interesting little spin on it. I don't know. Which one do you like better?
Well, it's funny because I think you have to have the first one or the second one. You have to have the second one before you can have the third one. And the thing is I do love what Alan Moore did with his origin, but it's created this trend where writers will take over a character and they'll rewrite their origin, and everything you knew was a lie, right? And so they'll try to kind of rewrite the origin to make it more complex or more whatever. Like I remember the worst example was when J. Michael Straczynski took over Spider-Man in I think 2001, and the classic origin of Spider-Man is a radioactive spider bites Peter Parker and he gets spider powers. But J. Michael Straczynski turns it into the spider gave. Peter Parker is a spider totem, and the spider had its own powers and gave them. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, and it's just really unnecessary complication. Yeah. It didn't work. So
I'll be honest. I don't know which way I like the Swamp Thing better. Because I like the original origin story. I think is real simple. It's a classic comic book story, and it gives you the motivation, and it makes him a tragic figure and all that. And then the Alan Moore version. It's very magical and fantastic, and it ties into all this other mythology and everything. So that's cool, I guess. But I don't know. I think if I'm writing it, I just do the original version. I just like that one better.
The one thing I'll say is that I think Swamp Thing's a great series, but I think the one reason I never got into it as much as other Alan Moore comics is because the character is not human, right? So he's a little bit harder to relate to when he's an earth elemental rather than just a regular guy. Right?
I'm just not like magic and all that fantasy. It's just not for me.
Sure.
That's just not my thing. You know.
Yeah.
I can respect it. I see what he's doing. I appreciate it, but it's just not my thing. Yeah.
Sure, understandable.
So, all right, there's some other things we got to talk here before we get into the book because it's a lot of weird shit. You got to kind of need a foundation for it. There's a couple terms you need to understand. One is the green.
Right.
The green. Would you like to explain the green, Michael?
From what little I know of the green, I believe the green just represents all of the vegetable life on Earth, correct?
Yeah, it's basically like this sentient form of plants, and it connects all plants together. All combined, they're known as the green.
Right.
Basically, yeah. The plant consciousness of Earth is the green. Right. Then we have a lady named Abigail Cable.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know her background and everything?
You know, again, I've read this whole series, but I don't know much about her other than that she was a woman that I thought she was his original girlfriend, but I guess not. No. But she falls in love with Swamp Thing, but she does think that he's Alec Holland. And then in these last few issues, actually in this issue, she finally learns for sure that he's not Alec Holland, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
so.
At the end of this issue, she finally learns for sure, because this is only Alan Moore's like 5th issue.
Because I was a little confused. I did read some more Swamp Thing after this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I jumped ahead to like, I guess one of the most famous Swamp Thing issues is like annual number 2, I believe.
Okay.
And he has to go into hell to save her soul.
Oh boy, yes, that's a good one.
And at the end, she calls him Alec, and he starts to cry because he knows he's not Alec.
Okay.
So I think that happens after this.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So did she just forget that he wasn't Alec, or?
I'm not really sure. Now, did you read the anatomy lesson?
I did not. I went back and read issue 1 of volume 2, though.
You should. It's really good.
Yeah.
Oh, you read issue 1? No. For me, I've never gone before number 20 or whatever it was. Like, I read maybe 1. I think it was by Martin Pasco. I just didn't really like it that much, so.
Well, I wanted to see if, like, the origin in volume 2 is the same as the origin in volume 1, and, like, it's kind of like in a flashback kind of thing, I think.
Okay.
But, it's the same thing. So, all right. So, but Abigail Cable, I guess Swamp Thing's big villain, his mortal enemy in the early days was a fella named Anton Arcane.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's this magician kind of guy who wanted to become immortal. And at some point he discovers the Swamp Thing, and he wants to put his consciousness in the Swamp Thing's body because he thinks it'll make him immortal or something like that. So he captures the Swamp Thing, and his niece is Abigail. And her father is Anton's brother named Gregory, who Anton. It gets very convoluted, as all comic book histories does. But Anton like tricks or betrays Gregory and his wife, and he frames his wife as a witch, and he gets her burned at the stake. And then he starts to take what do they call it when you guardianship of the niece, and he tries to train her in the ways of the arcane magic.
Okay.
Because she's already like born an empath and a telepath, and she has like mental powers or something. So Gregory doesn't like this, and he tries to keep her away from his uncle, and his uncle ends up, Gregory steps on a landmine that his uncle had sabotaged the forest, and he blows up. And then his uncle, or her uncle, turns her dad into a guy named the Patchwork Man.
Okay, yes, Patchwork Man.
Who's basically like a Frankenstein ripoff.
Right.
And so that's all going on. But anyway, this Abigail, she then meets a fella named Matt.
Keep track.
Yeah, just take notes of all this. She meets a fella named Matt Cable, who's a government agent. Okay. And he was friends with Alec and Linda Holland. He was the agent that put them in that house at the bayou. Gotcha. So he brings Abigail to the United States. She's only 17 at the time. Okay. So they're just strictly friends, quote unquote. But they have adventures, and they're trying to track down Swamp Thing because Matt Cable believes Swamp Thing killed Alec Holland. Gotcha. So he's hunting Swamp Thing. Abigail's always there, but Swamp Thing helps them out and he saves their lives several times. So they realize, hey, this Swamp Thing, he's not that bad. He's not a bad guy. Eventually, Abigail and Matt Cable, when she gets into her 20s, they get married. But their continued interactions with the Swamp Thing, she starts to fall in love with Swamp Thing.
And this all happened before this issue?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So then she I guess splits up from Cable. Then Cable is in a car wreck, and he's about to die. The spirit of Anton Arcane, who had died previously, makes a deal with him to take over his body and to come back. It's very confusing. It's very confusing.
Yikes.
But the point is, eventually, this Abigail Cable that we see in this issue, her and Swamp Thing marry.
Okay.
And she becomes Swamp Thing's wife, and they make this sweet, sweet love.
That's right.
Swamp Thing and a human lady make the sweet, sweet love. Mm-hmm. I don't ask me how. I don't know how that works from a biological standpoint. But they produce a child as well.
That's right.
Like her name is Tefe or Teflon or something.
I think it's Tefe, yeah. I read these years ago, so I don't remember all the details, but yeah.
So that is wild, wild stuff. Now, Mike-DELL, I did jump ahead. I think I also read issue 34 of Swamp Thing, because that's where they kind of get married, I believe. Right?
Okay.
Now, do you understand how what their marriage was like? Did you ever experience this?
I did read it. I remember the sex scene. I believe he took off a piece of himself and she ate it. Yeah. It was like a... That's right. Didn't she say it tasted like... it was a specific vegetable. I don't remember which one. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it kind of looks like a yam.
Yeah, yam. That's right. That's right.
But then when she kisses him, she says it tastes like lime.
Okay.
And he goes, do you like lime? She goes, it's my favorite. But anyway, yeah. So because in that issue, I'm trying to remember. I think I read something that in her previous marriage, she didn't like sex.
Okay.
She didn't want to have sex with her husband. I think. I don't know. But anyway, so Swamp Thing and her, they're falling in love. And, but Swamp Thing says, I know we can't have the sex. But then eventually they do end up having sex in a traditional way. I don't understand this. But anyway, he says, I wanted to share something with you. So he grows like this turnip or a yam on his body. And he takes it off and he has asked her to eat it. And it's basically like psychedelic. It's like a psychedelic mushroom.
Right.
So she bites into it and she starts tripping balls and she starts experiencing everything that Swamp Thing experiences, like his connection to the earth and all living things. And so there's like a 4 or 5 page sequence of her just flipping out and him like, having this communal experience. So they don't have sex in the traditional way, but I guess it would be like emotional sex, intercourse. I don't know.
Psychological, yeah. And
then when she comes down from the trip, they're like, oh yeah, so I guess that means we're like going together now or something. He's like, yeah, I guess so. And they kiss. And that was their marriage. So, yeah.
Nice.
How about Swamp Thing, Mike? Oh, he's getting it done.
I know, eh?
Even
a swamp creature can get it done. I can't get it done anyway.
Yeah, he's getting more action than I am, and he's Swamp Thing. I need some of those magic turnips. The ladies. They'll like it. But yeah, so that's Abigail. All right, so then one more thing we got to talk about before we get into the issue. A fella named Woodrue.
Right.
Woodrue. Do you know his history?
Oh, boy, not really.
All right.
I just know he's the Floronic Man, right?
Yes, the Floronic Man.
Right.
His origin, his actual first appearance, Mike-DELL, he was created by Gardner Fox and Gil Kane, and his first appearance was in the Atom #1, 1962.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, because I was a little confused on his backstory, because originally he started out as Dr. Jason Woodrue, one word, Woodrue.
Okay.
Last name, Roodrue. And he was a master of plants. He was this evil scientist who could control plants. He wanted to take over the world with plants. But then I read something that he was also from another dimension, or so I don't know what. I'm just going to pretend he was a human doctor.
Okay.
And he wanted to take over. But eventually he becomes Woodrue, the Floronic Man. And now now Woodrue is 2 words. Wood space Rue.
Well, I think that's more of like his mystical name now, right? Like he's Woodrue. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's how I took it.
But,
okay.
Describe what he looks like for the kids.
Well, let's see. He's kind of like a, like Swamp Thing. He's kind of like a creature made out of vegetation. It seems, right? Well, he's man-like, but he has like sort of leaves on his head and his shoulders and his waistline and his wrists, basically.
Yeah, to cover up the naughty bits. He's
exactly.
got leaves. And his skin's like bark, so he looks like a living tree, kind of.
Right.
Yeah. Woodrue. So he's the villain in this issue.
Right.
Now, do you know, since you said you read issue 20 and stuff, would you like to fill in the background how we got to this point that we are at when this issue begins?
Oh, well, I read, I don't remember how it leads into this, but he is in the anatomy lesson. I know that. Yeah,
he's the guy who uncovers the fact that Swamp Thing isn't Alec Holland, that he's actually an Earth elemental who believes Holland.
Right.
So, and then when Swamp Thing is confronted with that information, he starts freaking out. He starts having an identity crisis kind of thing. So, but before that, some evil dude hires Dr. Woodrue to capture Swamp Thing and to study Swamp Thing and to figure out how he turned into Swamp Thing.
Right.
So they have Swamp Thing like frozen, like cryogenically, so he's can't move or whatever. And so Woodrue's studying him. He comes up with this, theory. But then somehow the guy pisses off Woodrue. So Woodrue thaws out the Swamp Thing, and Swamp Thing wakes up and he kills the evil dude.
Right.
But then Woodrue tells him, "Hey, you're not actually Alec Holland, buddy. You're this Earth elemental." So Swamp Thing starts to like regress emotionally and even physically. He starts to like collapse a bit, and Woodrue starts eating Swamp Thing.
Really, I don't remember that part.
He starts eating stuff off of Swamp Thing, and that makes him trippy, like kind of like Abigail.
Sure. Okay.
So he loses his mind.
Okay.
And he goes nuts, and he comes up with this big plan that, hey, I'm going to take over the world. I'm going to make the plant the green. I'm going to serve the green, and we're going to take over the world. We're going to kill all humanity, so it's going to be nothing but plants. And that brings us to this issue.
Right. So we drop into the middle of the story, and basically Jason Woodrue is on the news telling everybody his plan about how he's going to convert. He's turning the entire atmosphere or everything on Earth that's oxygen, he's turning it into carbon dioxide, right?
No. He's amping up the oxygen in the atmosphere. Okay,
right.
Because ironically enough, if the atmosphere gets too much oxygen, it's bad for humans.
Exactly.
Because he could also say you couldn't do anything. With the oxygen that high, like if there's a spark, it'll all be flammable. It'll put you back to the Stone Age.
Right. Any spark will unleash an inferno. That's right. Yeah. Okay.
So I thought that was pretty cool that he's going to kill humanity just by upping the oxygen.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we open this story, we're introduced to the Justice League satellite, and I mean, I don't know, we can get into this later, but the key thing with this issue is not necessarily the plot of the issue, it's how Alan Moore writes it. I think you'll agree, right?
Yeah, in theory.
It's hard for me to just say, well, the Justice League are in their satellite and they're talking. Like, it's all about the way Alan Moore describes them, like there is a house above the world where the over people gather. There is a man with wings like a bird. And he basically goes through all the Justice League, and this is a very poetic way, a very unique way of looking at them. There's a man who can see across the planet and wring diamonds from its anthracite. Yeah. There is a man who moves so fast that his life is an endless gallery of statues. In the house above the world, the over people gather and sit and listen. And so this is the Justice League.
And notice with all those poetic descriptions, he leaves out Green Arrow. Oh, there's another guy that shoots sticks. Yeah, that's all he is.
No, I know. It's just like in the Avengers movie when they've got Thor and Captain America and Iron Man, and then you've got like Hawkeye and Black Widow. Like, what do they do? Nothing. You know?
What can you do?
But it's so cool because they're kind of, again, it's very well thought out because they're going through all of the ways that they could deal with this problem, but every solution they come up with someone else will point out the flaw in that solution. And so basically, after those 2 pages, we kind of leave them because at that point, they can't think of how to deal with this issue, right? They can't think of how to solve it. And so then we cut back.
Well, let's just say real quick who's all there, because
Sure.
we mentioned Batman wasn't there, but Green Lantern's there, Superman's there, Hawkeye, Wonder Woman, Firestorm, Aquaman, Green Arrow, and I think that in Flash.
And on the cover is, what's her name? Zatanna.
That's Zatanna?
Yeah, I don't remember if she's in the story, but that's Zatanna. I believe, it's Zatanna. I'm pretty sure.
Are you sure with that red thing on her head?
Oh, then maybe it's Gypsy.
Yeah, I don't know who Gypsy is, but that's probably Gypsy, not Zatanna.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's mention the cover real quick. It's interesting.
Yeah, the Justice League are looking at a gigantic screen of Swamp Thing facing off against Woodrue, and Woodrue's holding a, what's it called? A
chainsaw.
Chainsaw, yeah.
Yeah. What, you're tripped up on chainsaw?
Yeah. But yeah, it's a misleading cover because it makes it look like the League is much more involved in the story than they are, right?
Yeah. And we got Green Arrow with this broken arrow in his hands because he's so mad he snapped his arrow.
That's right.
And, we have Green Lantern consoling that woman who we don't know whether it's Zatanna. And we have Firestorm kind of like, with his fist ready to punch the screen, and Superman's like, calm down, Firestorm, calm down.
Yep.
But it's so strange. And a big blurb on the cover, enter the Justice League of America.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you love the Justice League of America and you love watching them just sit around and talk, this is the comic for you.
Well, it's funny because the one thing is it does show how like the scale of this plan and how massive it is, right? Like it's affecting the whole. So it's cool because they have to show in the DC universe, if you're going to have a scale of this, a conflict of this scale, you have to bring in the Justice League, right? So I think that's
but they're all just sitting up there in their spaceship there, like sitting around like, hey, what should we do? I don't know. What do you think we should do? I don't know. What do you think we should do? And so then we cut back to the Earth and we see Woodrue and his interesting. Oh, by the way, the issue title is called Roots.
Right.
And this is 1984. We should mention what year it is, I guess, 1984.
So it's kind of a reference to the infamous television miniseries, right?
Probably, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Now, we get a big splash page here of Woodrue standing in like a red background and all his plant life. And notice that Swamp Thing is spelled out on the ground. Yep,
just like something Will Eisner would do, yeah.
Yeah. So then Woodrue's talking to the Swamp Thing, and what's going on here, Michael?
Well, they're basically talking and kind of they're talking a lot and kind of psyching each other out, and is talking about what's going on. That's the thing with this issue. It's like there's a lot of talking, which is fine.
Well, Woodrue's trying to get Swamp Thing to join him.
Right.
Like, join my plan. Come with me because you're special.
And he also points out that he was the one that gave him the link to the green, right?
Yeah, and he says, here's a lady. He's got this lady tied up in these vines and stuff. He's like, here's a sacrifice. Take this lady. Take her soul and join me. And Swamp Thing punches him and frees the lady. And then Woodrue gets pissed. He calls him a traitor. And then he makes a sharp, pointy trunk grow out of the ground and stabs Swamp Thing through the chest.
Right. Right. Because Swamp Thing is a hero, right? There's no way he's going to take that woman.
Yeah. He doesn't need to take a woman. He can just give her a turnip and then they have sex.
Yep.
So now suddenly there's all these bunch of other people just out of nowhere. Like all these others, because for the first 2 pages, it's just Swamp Thing, Woodrue, and that lady. And now there's people everywhere. They're running around trying to get away. And Swamp Thing we see Abigail Cable.
Right.
She shows up and she's distinctive because she has white hair with black streaks.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. And she's talking to this old guy, and this old guy's like, because Woodrue and Swamp Thing are duking it out. And while all the other people are running away, this old guy says, hey, just wait, I want to be back with, what's her name? Evangeline.
Yeah. Who's Evangeline, right? We don't know.
Yeah, who's Evangeline? So then what happens, Michael?
So then she goes back to watch the fight to see what's going on. Yep. And basically Woodrue is using his powers. What is he doing here?
He puts like Swamp Thing. He ties him to the ground and like vines and stuff.
Right. So Swamp Thing is down for the count.
But then here's what I cannot tell what the hell's happening here, Mike.
Okay.
Like you see the middle 3 panels. We see Swamp Thing on the ground. Then we see a close up of Woodroo's face. Then we see a shadow of Woodroo like doing something. And then the next thing we know, the next panel, it's like Swamp Thing's arm sticking out from something.
But that looks like a brick wall there.
Yeah, apparently what he does is he has that brick wall collapse on Swamp Thing. But you have no idea of knowing that by what
No, that's very confusing. Yeah, it is.
It is not well done.
Yeah. Well, because you can see 2 pages later that it's kind of like a house, but yeah, it's kind of unclear where they are exactly. But then in between we cut up back to the Justice League satellite. I should point out it is a satellite, not a spaceship, right? Yeah.
All right.
So once again, they're kind of going over the different options, like, hey, why don't you contact, the Guardians of the Universe on Oa? But they're alien vegetables, so they won't be able to talk to, the Green. And so they're basically going through everything here. And then Firestorm suggests that he could change all, convert the oxygen into carbon dioxide. And
to like strike the balance that we need for the humans.
And then Superman's like, for one thing, do you know how many molecules make up Earth's atmosphere? If you wanted, I could count them. It's just so cool, right?
So stupid. Superman. That was such an arrogant, pretentious, smug thing to say. This is the worst version of Superman I've ever read.
No, it's not. But it's only arrogant to us, but to him, it's just, he doesn't think of it as arrogant, right?
That's why it's arrogant.
No,
because he doesn't even realize that it's arrogant.
No.
But it's so stupid. Like, he could count every molecule in the atmosphere. Give me a break.
He's the last son of Krypton and the action ace. You know this, right?
It's so dumb. Superman is stupid. I can't stand Superman.
So you hate Superman and you hate Batman.
Yes, they're the worst.
You hate Gypsy.
I like Superman, George Reeves Superman, the old 50s TV show. I can get behind that Superman.
I like that one too.
They just made him too powerful. He can count every molecule. Give me a break.
Well, he can.
Come on.
It's not his fault that he's powerful.
It's just stupid. Now, Mike-DELL, I have a question for you here, Mike-DELL.
Sure.
I'm not really into the Hawkman. I don't know the Hawkman too much. I guess he's a space monkey, right? Technically, he's a space monkey.
What do you mean?
Like, he comes from outer space.
Well, yeah, he comes from outer space. He's not a monkey, though.
Yeah, that's true. I just call any alien a space
monkey.
Oh,
okay.
But here he's got his like helmet on.
Yes.
And he's got the eyes in the helmet, but the helmets are way up on his head.
Yes.
Is that how Hawkman's always? So for those who can't see this, like, he has this big hawk thing on his head, but it's really situated on his forehead. Right. And his eyes are in shadow, yet the mask has eyes in it. Is that how he's always depicted? Or
no, definitely not. Like, in his original appearances, the hawk eyes were always his eyes. Yes. They were just, it was like a mask. This is more like, it's almost like someone's wearing like a lion skin and they just happen to have the lion's head draped over their head, right? Like, it doesn't quite fit. It's kind of loose. Yeah, I as far as I know, this is the first time you've seen him this way, as far as I know.
Hopefully the last as well, because why would you even wear that? It would like just get in the way. You wouldn't be able to see anything. It's like the nose would be hanging in front of between your eyes, and it's just, what's the point of this? I don't understand. I don't know.
Okay.
I was very upset by it. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, so then the Justice League, they still don't know what they're going to do. They still don't know what they're going to do, because Hawkeye says every battle. Flash is like, what's this Floronic man? Why are we so worried? We beat him in every battle we've ever fought. He's like he's a chump. You know, why is this such a big deal? And he says, Hawkman says, maybe we beat him in every battle, perhaps, but this is a war.
Yes.
And the other side isn't taking prisoners.
Yep.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh.
So then we cut back to the Earth there, and Floronic man and or Woodroo, whatever the hell you want to call him, he's going after Abigail now.
Right. And now we see that they're kind of in a house, I think, or an abandoned house or a demolished house. We don't know.
Yeah, there's wreckage of a house there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what's his name comes back, and
the
old guy comes back, and we learn what Evangeline is. It's his chain.
Yeah, it's his chainsaw, and this is like the biggest chainsaw.
And so he goes in there.
I've ever seen, Mike-DELL. The blade on this chainsaw.
Yeah.
It's like
I think it's just the perspective. The perspective is off, I think.
Holy
fuck,
yeah,
it is a pretty big chainsaw.
Yeah.
It's like 5 times as big as the guy. But anyway, and then basically he tries to use it and is not successful. he gets knocked down, and then Woodrue decides that he's going to use it. And he's like, yes, as a symbol. Of course, your film industry has canonized this instrument, has it not? And so now he's going to use this thing as a weapon, right?
Yeah,
so
he's going to carve up Abigail. Right.
But before he can do that, what happens is Swamp Thing comes back up from the ground behind him.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, Mike-DELL, I had no idea what was happening here at first. In this first 4 panels here, Woodrue has the chainsaw above his head, and he's holding it with 2 hands. Then in the second panel, we see, again, 2 hands there. So it's like, wait, what? Did he just change? But one of those hands is Swamp Thing's hand.
Right, it's green.
It's tough to tell because everything's kind of yellow and green and red. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you hear a crack, and then so Swamp Thing grabbed his arm and snapped his arm.
Right.
He drops the chainsaw.
Right. Mm. And then Woodrue says, why do you keep coming back and hurting me? And Swamp Thing says, because you are hurting the green. Yeah. And Woodrue says, me? That's not true. That's not true at all. I'm the green servant, blah, blah, blah. And then Swamp Thing points out all the damage that he's then he says, no, this is not the way of the wilderness. This is the way of man, right?
Yeah, look, you destroyed all this stuff. That's what men do. Yeah. Right.
And then we see an overhead shot. And again, we didn't really see this before, but they are in a damaged house, and we can see that the roof is off now and all the walls are kind of busted up, right?
Yeah.
And so basically now they're arguing back and forth about who's good, who's bad, and who did what. And he's basically psyching him out, right?
Well, what does Swamp Thing tell him that really wins the day? He
basically says, and what? Oh, so sorry. Woodrue says the plants will pour out oxygen and all the animals will die. Only we shall remain. Don't you see? It's the only way. It's the only way to save the planet from those creatures. And then Swamp Thing says, and what will change the oxygen back into the gases that we need to survive when the men and the animals are dead? And then Woodrue's like, oh shit, I didn't think of that.
Yeah. Oops. I never thought of that. So Woodrue, he has a mental breakdown, and he loses connection with the green.
Right.
He can no longer sense the green around him. He's isolated and alone, and he freaks out, and he starts running away. And he starts running and running and running. Yeah. So
and then he finds this one little flower, and he's like, oh, please don't go. It's lonely. There's a hole in my head as big as the world, and it's so very lonely. Please stay. But then that little plant dies too. And then he just takes off.
Yeah, so then Swamp Thing explains to Abigail exactly what happened. Like he's uprooted. The plant's back down. It's over. It's done.
Right.
The big thing's done. So they start walking away. And she does say, you said earlier, you weren't Alec. No, Alec Holland is dead. He died many years ago in an explosion. Yeah, how about that?
Yep. So this is where she finally learns. She's like, and who are you? I am the Swamp Thing.
Yep.
So then they hug and all that, and then they're chatting, and he's like, I'm gonna go back home to the swamp. And then we cut back to Woodrue.
Yes.
He's running along in the swamp, still running. And then he comes across. Well, I don't even know what this is here. Is this like a piece of?
I don't know. He finds some it looks like a spaceship, a crashed spaceship or something. I don't know.
Oh, you know what? I think it's from a previous issue. Yes. There was an alien that crashed in the previous issues. So it's probably from that.
Okay. But this is my favorite part. He reaches in, he goes into this, whatever it is, and he sees a canister there, Mike-DELL. And he reaches for the canister. What's in the canister?
It's called Flexiflesh.
Flexiflesh.
And this is kind of sad because he knows that the people are coming, and so he tries to spray this stuff on himself to make him look more human.
Yeah.
But then basically Superman and Green Lantern touch down, and they're basically confronting him. Woodrue. He's like, Woodrue, well, yes, but call me Jason. I'm one of you. I'm human. And we cut to the next page, and he just... he's clearly this guy made out of bark, but he's got this spray-on flesh on top of it, and it's just ridiculous, but also kind of pathetic, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really sad.
Yeah,
but it's also hilarious because flexi flesh, and spray-on flesh. Yeah, so Superman and Green Lantern are like, oh, this guy's fucked up. We need to help him. So Superman takes his cape off and hangs it around his shoulders, like, hey, calm down, buddy. It'll be okay. We're going to take you to Arkham Asylum.
It's funny because he says it's okay. We'll find you a doctor. And then Superman says one word, Arkham I guess so. Like, yeah, Looney Bin. Okay, that's where he's going. You know?
Yeah, we'll take care of you. Arkham and Green Lantern's like, yep, lock him away.
Yeah.
And the Green Lantern's like, what happened here? And Superman says, I don't know. Let's just be grateful that there's something watching out for the places no one watches out for. Oh, yeah, we should mention earlier in the issue, one of the big things that Justice League said when they're up in their spaceship /satellite / nonsensical headquarters, they're like, we've been so busy worrying about New York, Chicago, London, name all these big cities. Who was worried about Louisiana, like this small town in Louisiana? So here at the end, it's a callback to it. Someone was looking out for this small Louisiana town. That thing was the Swamp Thing. But here's what I don't get about. All right, so that's basically where it ends, right?
And then basically Swamp Thing is kind of just thinking to himself, thinking, and then he kind of just goes back into the swamp. And we have a really nice ending shot of him just looking up at the sky. I
don't like that ending shot. It's a big splash page of him with his arms extended wide, his head tilted back, and he's just embracing all of the world, like all the plants. He's one with nature and all that. But I don't like how his feet are together. His feet should have been apart to make him look more sturdy and manly.
Understandable, yeah. We'll break down it later, yeah.
He kind of looks like Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music.
Yeah, you could say that.
So I think they could have done a better job making him look cooler. But yeah. So, and I don't get this so Woodrue sensed that the Justice League were coming for him because I guess he has that power. He could sense people are coming for him. So when Superman and Green Lantern come down to Earth, Mike-DELL, they don't know that it's all over, right? Like, how would they? Like, they don't know Woodrue's plan just ended moments ago by Swamp Thing.
Now that's a good point, but I think we can just infer that it's over because you're right. Like usually,
it is over. It is over. But how would they know it's over?
Well, I know what you're saying, but like we can infer that they know it's over because usually, and if this was like a movie, you'd see like a news report like. And it's been confirmed that the oxygen levels, but we don't see that. But obviously they must have, someone must know, right? And then
but how would they possibly know? It was literally like 3 minutes ago.
Well, if Superman can count the molecules in the atmosphere, maybe he counted them and figured out everything was back to normal.
Because they just land and like they don't say, "Hey Woodrue, let's talk," or "Hey Woodrue, you need to stop this plan," or They just land, and Woodrue's like, "Hey, fellas, look at me with my suit and fancy flesh. I'm a guy."
Yeah.
Like there's no reference to the plan whatsoever.
Well, it's almost like there's definitely like a beat missing because he runs away, and then it's just Swamp Thing and her talking. You're right, but there's no moment where you go, "Okay, the plan is foiled."
We needed a shot of them up in their space headquarters there with them saying, "Hey, guess what? The oxygen level's back to normal."
Right, you're totally right. Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I'll give you that. Yeah.
We better find what happened. Let's go try and figure out what happened. Let's go find this Woodrue.
Right.
I don't know. I didn't like any of that. It seems like this was just a way to shoehorn the Justice League in to try and get more sales.
That's possible. Yeah.
Because really, you could take the Justice League out of this, and they do nothing.
Right. Other than coming in and arresting them, which could have been done by the cops.
Yeah. Literally, they have no purpose in this story whatsoever.
That's true.
Whatever. So there it is, Swamp Thing. My first experience with the Swamp Thing. How about that? All right, let's talk to creators here. We've mentioned him many times. Alan Moore.
That's right.
He's the writer. He was born in Northampton, England, 1953. He was kicked out of school for dealing LSD. Really?
I didn't know that.
Yep. And he bounced around. He had some various jobs. He was cleaning toilets. He was working in a tannery. Then he got an office gig at like a gas company somewhere. And then he said, when he was like 20 or so, he's like, "Hey, you know what? I just can't do this. I need something more creative." So he just quit and he started writing his own comic books. Started making his own comics and comic strips and stuff. And he wrote for various fanzines. And in 1979, he did a comic strip called Maxwell the Magic Cat.
Yes.
Did you ever read Maxwell the Magic Cat?
I might have read like one strip. I think he did it while he was in university or something, didn't he?
Possibly. Let's see.
Around that age.
No. That was 79, so he would have been 26 at the time he did Maxwell the Magic Cat. So yeah. Okay. He started getting regular gigs with 2000 AD, which was Britain's premier comic magazine. Mm-hmm. And over the next few years, he had over 50 of his stories published in 2000 AD. Then he started working for Marvel UK, doing Doctor Who Weekly and Star Wars Weekly.
Yep.
In 1982, he started writing for Warrior Magazine.
Yep.
Published by Quality Communications. And in there, Mike-DELL, he did V for Vendetta.
That's right.
And Marvel Man.
Yep.
Now, you love Marvel Man, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Don't even get me into the Marvel Man, Miracle Man stuff, or I'll get very confused again.
It is very confusing. Yeah.
What is more confusing? Swamp Thing's origin, Miracle Man, Marvel Man, or DC Crisis on Infinite Earths?
Oh, I don't know. That's tough. Probably Crisis.
Yeah,
it covers everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Crisis as well. All right, so in 1993, Len Wein hired Moore to write the saga of the Swamp Thing for DC. He did all but 2 issues from issue 20 to 64. Yeah. So it was basically a 4-year run, and he was the first British comic book writer to work regularly in the U.S.
That's right.
How about that? He also did a couple famous Superman stories in 1985 and 1986. Are you aware of these Superman stories, Mike-DELL?
Is the Pope Argentinian? Of course. I own several copies of each. There's the man who for the man who has everything. There's whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
Yeah, the Man Who Has Everything. Basically, they're trying to find a birthday gift for Superman. Isn't that what's going on?
Yes.
That's something.
It is. It's excellent.
All right.
And then there's also a DC Comics Presents team up with Superman and Swamp Thing.
Oh, I did not know that.
That's by far the least famous. No one ever talks about that one, but that is the third Superman story he did.
Did Swamp Thing make him eat a turnip?
No, I don't think so.
And they had sweet, sweet love?
I don't think so.
All right. In 1986, he reached a new level when he did Watchmen.
That's right.
Now, the thing about Watchmen, like, I didn't read it until, like, probably 5 years ago or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, you totally lose its significance in the comic book industry. But when it came out in 86, there was nothing like it.
That's right. Yeah.
It totally changed comic books. So, and it has to be, whether I think it's the greatest thing ever, it has to be recognized as one of the most influential things in comic books, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And I really did like it, you know. I'm trying to think of why I didn't think I mean, it was great. But I guess I thought it was a little too artsy sometimes with the little side piece, the little subplots about the guy selling the pirate comic books. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you could have got rid of that.
You could have. You know what? It's funny because Alan Moore references Moby Dick a lot, and I finally read Moby Dick last year. Have you read the novel?
What do you think?
Yes.
Yes.
You're an English major, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm Mr. Literature. Of course I read Moby Dick.
Now, for me, because I've, studied screenwriting, one of the things about screenwriting is, eliminate the ornamental, don't include anything that doesn't, advance the plot. Yeah. Well, Moby Dick, as you know, has chapter after chapter about the color white and about whaling and blah, blah, blah. But
about whales and the whaling industry. But keep in mind, Mike-DELL, one thing people always forget when they criticize this is when he wrote that, no one knew jack shit about whales.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Like, if you read it as a modern reader, it's like, oh, why is he wasting so much time talking about whaling and whales? Right. No one knew about that. Like, it was totally obscure. You couldn't just turn on TV and watch a documentary about whales. Sure. This was, so in that sense, it was kind of important. But,
sure.
But I get what you're saying. When you're reading the novel, you're like, why am I spending all this time reading about whaling? But yeah.
Right. And I didn't mind. And that's the thing is, I guess it just depends. It's kind of like, what do you, I don't know. I mean, if you're going in thinking this is what a story has to be, then you're not going to enjoy that. But if you just, I guess, expand your, not the parameters of what you're looking for, but you know what I mean? Like, it adds a different dimension to it. Just like when you read Watchmen, there's the stuff about the pirates, but there's also, do you remember like at the end of every issue, there's all those text pieces?
Yeah, I skipped over those.
Yeah, I read them the first time, and I never read them again, but they are all good. It's just that you don't need them. Like, you can easily read the story without them, but if you do read them, they add an extra dimension to it.
And the other thing that sours me a wee bit on Watchmen is he just ripped off the plot from an old, like, Twilight.
Oh, yeah, Outer Limits, actually. Yeah, the ending is a rip-off. That's true, but I still think it's great. But anyway.
So, it would be even better if you didn't rip it off. That'd be even better.
Of course.
All right. So where were we? Yeah, so that was Watchmen, and then Batman: The Killing Joke.
Yes.
Was that 88 or 87?
87.
Yeah, okay.
I believe so.
Well, I have 88 here, but I think it was 87.
I think, well, it would also took a long time to come out, so I think he wrote it probably in 87, and then it took a long time for Brian Bolland to dry.
It's around there. And once again, The Killing Joke, Mike-DELL, a hugely influential, although I guess some people could say it's a double-edged sword because it made Joker like this psychotic killer guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Like, it did elevate him to that next level.
But the downside of that is now everyone's just been kind of like trying to do that for the last 30 years, and it's kind of led to some terrible Joker stuff, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it also kind of ruined Batgirl for 30 years. I mean, I like the character. I don't want to say the character was ruined, but the problem whenever you do a story like that, because what happens is she ends up getting crippled, right? Is whenever you do something like that, like when you maim or kill a character, it's only good for that one story, right? What does the next writer do? You know,
not necessarily. Well, they made her Oracle, right?
That's true. No, that's for me. I don't want to come down on her because they did make some great stories out of her, but I don't know. It's just kind of one of those things. I mean, it'd be a great way to, like, if that was like the end of the character, like if you were to write a story that takes place in the future and that's how her character, like that superhero career ends, that'd be a great story. But it's just that now we have to get into legacy. Like now we have Cassandra Cain, Batgirl, and Stephanie, whatever Batgirl is, and then they eventually just ended up bringing back Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. So
really,
yep.
Like how'd they get her out of the wheelchair?
Oh, they just didn't explain it. They basically just rebooted Batgirl and said, "Oh, you know what? Yeah, she woke up one day and she was fine."
one day she woke up and says, "I'm tired of sitting in that chair."
Yeah,
tips it over.
Well, it's also ridiculous because in a universe where you have characters like Cyborg. Like why doesn't, and all these other, it's just like in Marvel, when you have Tony Stark, no one can ever have a disability because Tony Stark can just build something to fix it for you, right?
Yeah, he gave Misty Knight her bionic arm.
There you go.
Dang, yeah. So anyway. All right, so that's The Killing Joke. What else after that? Let's see. He left DC because he had arguments with them over creator rights and royalties. Because I guess he kind of got screwed on the Watchmen royalties, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And ownership of the characters. They were supposed to, basically DC said, hey, just sign this little thing here, and as soon as Watchmen goes out of print, you'll get the rights to the characters. And then they're like, hey, that sounds good. Because at that time, as you know, you'd publish a comic and maybe you'd get a second print or a third print. But Watchmen's been in print for 30 years. So basically it's never going to go back to Moore and Gibbons. So
yeah, so he vowed never to work for DC again. But we'll revisit that in a minute.
Yeah.
But he swore off mainstream comics for a bit, and he what did he? He started Mad Love Comics with his wife Phyllis and their mutual lover Deborah Delano. How about that, Mike-DELL?
It's called an experimental relationship. Yes.
their mutual lover.
Yep.
And that produced books like From Hell in 1989 and Explain From Hell for people, Mike-DELL.
It is based on a specific theory about the Jack the Ripper murders, that the killer was working for the Queen of England. And actually the theory, I didn't know this, but the theory was invented by, I believe it was either a novelist or a screenwriter. They made a movie of it like 30 years ago, and then he used that theory to write this movie. And really well done. Really well done.
Once again, he just ripped off someone else's idea.
Well, but I mean, it's kind of like someone else's theory of who it was. But I think at the time it was like he was like, well, this is the real story, so I'm going to do a comic about the real story. But now, over the years, basically, it's come out like they've dispelled that theory. It's not true. So.
And then they had something else called Lost Girls in 1991. Mm-hmm. Now, would you like to explain this?
This is where Alan Moore took a bunch of, I've only read one issue, but he took fictional characters like Alice in Wonderland, right? Or Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and a few others. I don't remember who the other ones were.
He took three. Alice from Alice in Wonderland, Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and Wendy from Peter Pan.
Okay. And basically he made a pornographic comic book of these characters having sex with each other and other people, I believe.
Well, they're adults now.
Okay, yes.
And these three girls who were famous in their childhood, they grew up and they become adults and they convert. They all are at one hotel for some reason, and they're trading erotic stories from their past. And and in between, they're also just banging everything that moves. So there you go.
Right. You know, it's funny. I own a gigantic hardcover edition, but I've never read it.
you just read it for the story, not for
the
because there is a lot of naked people in these books.
Right.
Just straight on sex depicted. So there you go. Lost Girls, as everyone's furiously Googling. He returned to mainstream comics with Image in 1993 and stayed until 1998. I had no idea.
Yes, no one does. But this is good stuff.
And he was doing like mainstream Image books too. Like he did his own 1963 would probably be his most famous Image production, right? 1963.
His most critically acclaimed, yeah. Because just for the record, I have them all. So I think the first thing he did was Spawn.
Yes.
He was hired to do one issue of Spawn, and then he ended up doing, I think, 2 miniseries, Violator, and I think he did...
he did another one. I can't remember, but
he
did 2.
And then he had a long run on Wildcats.
Yes, which is so weird to me.
The thing is, it's really good. Like, this is something, for some reason, no one knows about, but yeah, these are all really good comics.
And he also worked really... I think he did Superion as well.
You mean Supreme?
Supreme.
Okay, so can I cut in for a second and give you the rundown on Supreme?
Sure.
So I walk into a comic shop one day, pre-internet, right? And I see an issue of Supreme number 41, with a Jerry Ordway cover. Are you familiar with Jerry Ordway?
I recognize the name, but I wouldn't be able to tell you the art if I saw it. So
Jerry Ordway is famous for doing All-Star Squadron.
Oh,
and Superman. So he's known as like a classic superhero golden age type artist. So I see this cover, and it's Supreme by Jerry Ordway. I'm like, what the hell is this? It's written by Alan Moore. I'm like, what the hell? I crack it open, and basically what it is Alan Moore is doing Supreme as if Supreme is all of his... Like, Supreme was Image's ripoff of Superman, but Alan Moore wrote him as if he had been around since the 1930s, just like Superman. And so he created this huge backstory of a fake history and fake back issues and fake flashbacks, and altered his origin just like he did with Swamp Thing. And he basically made an in-story explanation for how characters, you know how, like, as we know with DC, every 10 or 20 years they'll reboot their universe and they'll start everything over from scratch, right? So Alan Moore made a story about that, about what happens to Supreme every time he gets rebooted. What happens to the previous version. And I won't say anything more, but it's really, really good.
What was I thinking of Superion? Is there a Superion?
Superion is a transformer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
but yes,
the 5 aerial bots form Superion.
Yeah, we're looking for Supreme here with Image. But yeah, he wrote, he did Spawn stuff, he did Violator, Shadowhawks of a Legend, #1, The Max, an issue of The Max, that Sam Keith book. Judgment Day. Youngblood.
Yep, good stuff.
Mr. Monster's Gal Friday.
I don't remember that one.
24 panels was something, I don't know. But the big one that we mentioned earlier, the most critically acclaimed, I guess, would be 1963. Describe that for the people.
So that's basically his tribute to Marvel Comics of the 60s. So he did, I believe it was 6 issues.
Yes.
And each issue is a tribute to a sort of a combination of mostly Marvel Comics. So one of them is, I believe it's Mystery Incorporated, which is the tribute to Fantastic Four. And then there's one called, help me out here.
I don't even know.
Yeah. It's like basically one of them will be sort of like Daredevil and Spider-Man, and then one of them will be sort of Iron Man. But I've got one of the creators on Facebook, and he said that they did include homages to other characters as well. But basically, you know, if you're a fan of 1960s Marvel, you've absolutely got to pick up 1963. And the good thing is they're available for really cheap. Like, you can dig them up in like quarter bins and dollar bins everywhere. So
yeah, I'm intrigued by that. I might have to read those.
Yeah, they're really good.
I'm intrigued. So then Jim Lee, well, he was working with Rob Liefeld, and then he got pissed at Rob Liefeld. Because apparently he said Rob Liefeld wasn't respecting the comics or the work.
Right.
So he said, I do not respect Rob Liefeld. So he quit working for Rob Liefeld. And Jim Lee gave Moore his own imprint under Jim Lee's Wildstorm Production Company.
That's right.
And Moore called his imprint America's Best Comics.
Yes.
But then right after they made that deal, Jim Lee sold all of Wildstorm, including America's Best Comics, to DC.
Right.
So Moore, even though he vowed to never work for DC again, technically he is now working for DC.
Yes. Under contract. Yep.
Yeah, he wasn't happy about it. He said he thought he was just going to, he considered bailing, but he said, well, we're too far into this already, and we got many other people involved. So he went ahead, he swallowed his pride, and he worked for DC again. Right. And the book he put out there was a little something called The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in 1999. And explain that premise to the people. That, again, is taking characters from fiction. Other people's ideas. Right? Just teaming them up together, right? So he had Invisible Man. He had, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Well, Mr. Hyde. He had, is it Mina Parker from Dracula? Oh, possibly. I don't remember her name. I can't remember her name. Yeah. Captain Nemo, right? Nemo, that's right. And a few other ones. And yeah, basically they just go on adventures, and it's kind of like a superhero comic, but it's, it's set in the late 1800s, I think. So pre-superhero, yeah. Kind of steampunkish. Steampunk, I was going to say that. And then they did adapt it to a movie, but the movie was so bad that it made Sean Connery quit acting forever. I actually watched a little bit of that movie. I saw like maybe 15 minutes of it on TV one time. Oh, I thought it was terrible. Anyway. So that's all I got written down for Moore. What else about Alan Moore? Well, I was going to say, beyond League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he also did a book called Tom Strong, which was another tribute to Superman. He did Top 10, which was kind of like a Justice League thing. He did one called Promethea, which is like a more cerebral version of Wonder Woman. Yeah, it's also really rooted in the occult and magic. Right, absolutely, yeah. And then he did one called Tomorrow Stories, which was an anthology of different stories. Like, there was one called Jack Be Quick. There was one called, I think it was called The U.S. American or something like that. There's another one called Gray Shirt. And I think, as far as I know, that the imprint lasted maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 years. And he wrote almost every issue. He had a few side miniseries that were written by a guy named Steve Moore, no relation. And then eventually the line kind of fizzled out. But every couple of years, DC would bring back Tom Strong for like a miniseries, or Gray Shirt for a miniseries. And then, unfortunately, just a few years ago, DC finally decided to shit the bed, and they incorporated Tom Strong into the DC universe. So, That's the end of that. He also apparently wrote like a massive book about pornography and the history of pornography and eroticism. I haven't read that, but yeah, he probably did, yeah. And he also wrote some novels. Mm-hmm. And I believe he wrote a novel called Jerusalem that is supposedly one of the 10 longest novels in history. Really? Yeah. I've heard of it. I didn't know it was that long, though. I just read that right before the show. I didn't really confirm it, so who knows. Okay. We should mention, he is a magician. He is a practicing magician, yes. And the occult. He's a big fan of the occult and magician. And he also has a blood rivalry, a wizard feud with fellow comic book writer Grant Morrison. This is true. Because they both are wizards. They're both magicians. Right. Yet they believe in different things about magic. I would say Moore is more in the Aleister Crowley line of magic. Okay, I don't know the difference. With Thelema and all that stuff. And so, oddly enough, so are many American politicians and government officials. So, what? Yes. Really? No jive. And then Grant Morrison is into chaos magic. Mm-hmm. So I know nothing about either of these. Do you? Yes, I do know this. Yes. Interesting. Where have you come across this in your travels? I've studied all kind of weird shit throughout my entire life. Really? If you've listened to LCS Hockey Radio Show, you're well aware of this. No, I don't. I only listen to the ones I'm on. So Well, that's more than most people listen to. But yeah, we've talked about this on LCS before.
Dang. Well, see. I thought all you did was talk about hockey, so that's why I don't listen to
No.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a very convoluted subject, but yeah, magic and people focusing intent and basically they consider it like a cheat code for reality. You can make stuff happen by doing magic.
I said, okay, then I'm going to have to highly recommend that you read Promethea then.
Yeah, I just was reading about Promethea right before the show, and yeah, it does sound like it's very rooted in the occult and magic. So, but anyway, Morrison and Moore, I guess they go back and forth at each other in their own books, like making fun of each other, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the full story, but there's a rivalry that started specifically, I believe, because of Miracle Man, where Grant Morrison was working in comics technically before Alan Moore. Alan Moore came along and exploded right in the UK with in popularity.
And Moore says that he gave Morrison his leg up in the business, but Morrison says that's not really true. And Moore says, I love Grant Morrison stuff. Both times I read it, first when I wrote it and then when he wrote it.
He has a way with words, eh?
And then Morrison did not like that. So, yeah, we could do a whole episode on just their wizard feud.
Absolutely.
But anyway. All right, so what did you think about the writing here in Swamp Thing 24?
Well, I thought it was really good. I mean, there's two ways you can judge this, by Alan Moore standards or by 1984 DC standards. By Alan Moore standards, I would give it maybe a 7 out of 10. But by DC 1984 standards, I give it a 10 out of 10. You know, maybe a 9. Maybe
it's
a 9.
A low bar.
Yeah.
I love the stuff with, I love the concept of Woodrue and, you know, his plan. And I like the Swamp Thing stuff. Again, the Justice League stuff I thought was just terrible. Like, it had no point to being in the story.
Well, here's the thing, though, is you're right, it didn't contribute to the plot, but I think the reason this issue stood out to me is because the way they were written. Like, I mean, I just I just posted a panel from a Justice League comic from 1984, and you would not believe how terrible it is. It's actually written by Jerry Conway, and you would not believe how bad it was.
Well, see, I have no concept of that, so I can't judge it.
That's true.
Like you're comparing it against like garbage, and like, well, this is slightly better.
Sorry.
I don't like the way it's written. Like the words used are fine, but I just don't. They have no point in this story. You know what I mean? There's no point for them being in the story.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're all just sitting around the way they're talking, let's do it. It makes them completely like they're very powerless, and in a way that's good because it shows how serious this problem is. But it also shows how like incompetent they are, that they're all just sitting around, like, for lack of a better term, with their dicks in their hands, thinking, "What do we do? What do we do?" You know, I don't know. I just wasn't a fan of it. And again, the ending, how Superman and Green Lantern just come down and like, "Hey, Woodrue, let's get you some help." I thought that was really bad. But I still like the stuff of Swamp.
Yeah.
Even I like the idea of it. I like the concept of it. Even though this magic earth elemental stuff's not my thing, I appreciate it, like what he's doing here. So I respect it. And like the actual nuts and bolts writing wasn't, you know, it was solid. But, you know, nothing spectacular, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's why I said the thing with this issue, it's not that the plot is great, it's the way Alan Moore writes the plot, and that's two different things, right? Because sometimes we'll read comics where they have a great story, or sometimes you'll read a story when you're a kid and you're like, oh my God, that story was so good. But then when you go back and reread it, you're like, oh my God, this dialogue is terrible. But it's kind of like underneath that, there's this good story, right?
But if you think of the plot as Woodrue's plan to take over the Earth, I like that.
Oh, no, that's cool. No, I'm not saying his plot. I'm saying the plot of the comic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you take out this Justice League stuff, it would be a lot better in terms of telling a story with plot. But yeah, it was okay. Nothing amazing, but not terrible. You know, just in the one. But I'll never forgive him for that line about
counting the molecules.
Yeah, I will never forgive that.
Oh. Makes me like Superman even more.
Oh, yeah. You just sent me that. I did see that panel you posted on Twitter.
Okay.
But you said Vibe never caught on? Who's Vibe?
Vibe is the guy in this thing. He's a he's a Latino character, the first ever, I think.
Oh, I thought that was Plastic Man.
No, it's Vibe. Yeah, and basically Jerry Conway learned to write his character by watching, Breakin' from 1983. Like, Jerry Conway's a good writer, but I think he's notorious for writing really bad racial minorities, and so a lot of people hated him around this time. But I think he's a good writer. It's just that he couldn't write anything other than straight white guys.
All right. Well, let's get into the art, because we got to talk about this too.
Sure.
All right. The artist is Steve Bissette.
Right.
The inker is a fellow named John Totleben.
Yeah.
I guess they worked as a team quite a bit. But we're just going to talk Bissette's background here. Bissette was born in Vermont in 1955. In 1978, he was part of the first graduating class of the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Art.
That's right.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
From 83 to 85, he did 15 issues of the Saga of Swamp Thing, starting with issue 16 and ending with issue 36. And then from 85 to 89, he did 10 issues and 2 annuals of Swamp Thing. So I guess they just changed the title. And that was from issues 39 to 78. So all told, he did 27 issues of Swamp Thing. Mm-hmm. A lot of Swamp Thing. In 1988, he edited and published the horror anthology Taboo, which serialized Moore's From Hell and Lost Girls.
Yes.
In 1993, he joined Moore again for issues 2, 3, and 4 of 1963 over at Image.
Yeah.
He drew those 3 issues. He retired from comics in 1989. He teaches art in Vermont, and he's also into film criticism. He writes some stuff, film critiques, and he has been the editor and publisher of Green Mountain Cinema since 2005, which focuses on the Vermont indie film industry. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Actually, it's funny. I've got him on Facebook, and I didn't even know that. But anyway.
Swamp Thing won the Jack Kirby Award for Best Series in 1985, 86, and 87 when he was doing the art. Bissette and Totleben won the Jack Kirby Award for Best Art Team in 1985, and they were nominated in 86 and 87. Now, is there anything else you want to say about his career? Do you know any of his other works?
No, not really. I can only say, I believe, did he do Brat Pack? Is that in there?
I didn't even notice that.
Okay.
Like in terms of mainstream books, like Long Run, Swamp Thing is basically
and I do enjoy it. But basically, I don't think he's a spectacular artist, but I'm a fan of his work overall. I think he's kind of like more of an important creator. Yeah, he also did. Brat Pack is by Rick Veitch. That's someone else. But yeah, Stephen Bissette. Yeah, I follow him on Facebook, and I think he's brilliant. Just looking, he's got these gigantic posts that he posts like almost every day, and he's brilliant. But I'm not a huge fan of his art. But I want to specify that to talk about the art in this issue, we do have to talk about John Totleben, because while I don't think that Stephen Bissette's art is great, I think the inks in this are incredible.
No, I could not disagree more.
Oh my God. I think
I hated the inking. I hated the inking on the faces of the people. I thought it was terrible.
Let's put it this way. These close-up shots of Swamp Thing, when you see like the texture of all the plants and the vegetation.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I'll agree with you that the faces don't look good, but I don't think that's his fault. I think that's Stephen Bissette's fault.
But he puts in all these lines on their faces, like these singular lines around their noses and the cheeks it's weird, man. I
know what you're saying, but I think it's hard to describe it. It's too bad people can't see this, but it's almost like remember the guy that goes and gets the Evangeline, the chainsaw? You're looking at his face, there is no outline of his face. It's like there's no beginning and ending of his face. It's just shading. But
yeah. You know what? When I'm looking at it again, I don't like the way he draws the Justice League. I think it's terrible, like the inking and that. But the stuff with the Swamp Thing and Woodrue, the inking there is tremendous. Yeah. See,
I don't know. I've seen him ink other people, and it looks like when you look at the Justice League, again, I'm blaming Stephen Bissette, because when they're standing around, their figures look terrible. Superman standing there looks like an amateur drew it, but then that close-up of Hawkman looks good. So you think, well, to me, that's probably because the inking is so detailed and so fluid, you know.
But I guess he inks with like hatch work and like all these little lines.
Yeah.
And I am not a fan. I like the inking later in the book when it's Swamp Thing because it's like solid blacks, and then that's really cool. I like that stuff. I just don't like that thatch work stuff. I don't like it. But I'll say this: the art here is a lot of interesting things with panels. Mm-hmm. And the Swamp Thing stuff is, I always think Swamp Thing looks good. Mm-hmm. But again, the people are terrible. The humans are terrible.
They're lumpy. I'll give you that. They're lumpy and
it's just not good. It looks very sketchy and unfinished sometimes. Like a couple of the drawings of Abigail early on are really bad. Sure. And the sequential storytelling, again, there are many times in this book where I had no idea what was happening.
And that's something, I'll agree with you on that. You're right. It's like you're just looking at these big close-ups and you have no idea. There's no backgrounds. You don't know what's going on around them, where they are. Yeah, that's true.
And again, suddenly there's just all these people there. Like, where did these people come from? I don't. So I'll say this, though. I did not like this art at all. So I'm like, well, then I saw that these guys won awards. I'm like, how the fuck did they win awards? So keep in mind, this was 1984. So they won their first award in 1985. So that's why I jumped ahead, because I wanted to see the art later on.
Okay.
And it does improve substantially.
Okay.
Yeah. It's still not like my favorite kind of art, but it's much better. So I can understand why they're winning awards a year or two later. But here, maybe they're still finding what works for them. Because they do kind of like a lot of impressionistic stuff. Like the fight scenes, like you'll see Swamp Thing like punch that Woodrue guy, but it'll just be like a bunch of lines.
Right. It's bad.
Like lines and like a face of Woodrue in pain. It really won't be like an actual physical, like a punching fight scene.
Well, but remember the scene where Woodrue sprays himself with that?
Yeah, Flexi Flesh.
That shot is excellent.
Yeah.
So I think
there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Like they'll do silhouette stuff with Woodrue's figure that's really cool.
Right.
Like I don't want to say, it's not terrible. It's just like it very much is like they're finding their style.
Sure.
And then also, like, if you fast forward, like I said, a year or two, they have their style down and it looks really good.
Sure. And also I think what it is that they're not, I mean, there's artists that are like this. It's like they're really good at certain things, but they're not great at anatomy. Or like, I'm assuming Stephen Bissette, he's just not great at anatomy. You know, it's like he's really good at close-ups, but then when you pull back, you realize he doesn't really know how to draw people, right?
Yeah.
So...
And again, they do a lot of interesting things here at the panels. Mm-hmm. So that's cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's not awful, but it's not amazing. It's in the middle of the road. But you can see potential here to be interesting. And then 2 years down the road, it does get interesting. Mm-hmm. So I would recommend, don't judge this art too harshly. Mm-hmm. Go 2 years down, read their later stuff with Swamp Thing when they were winning awards. It is very good. So.
Sure.
Now, Mike, when I was looking up this John Totleben fellow, I guess he drew Miracle Man then, right?
That's right. And that's where I first was exposed to him, and that's why I'm such a huge fan of his art.
Yeah, he's just inking here, but he was doing the penciling on Miracle Man, and from what I hear tell, it was very good.
Yes, it was. It was excellent.
All right. I haven't seen any of it, but yeah.
Style, yeah. Well, the inking style is exactly like this, but it's better art. Yeah, for sure. You can see it. You can Google it, but like one day we should do Miracle Man and I'm telling you, you've got to read Miracle Man. It's just so good. Love it.
So there you go. That's the Swamp Thing. Anything else about the creators or the story?
I can only that. Alan Moore is my favorite writer, and I've tried to buy every single thing he's ever written, and I'm probably 95% there. So,
well, sure you got to get every issue of Lost Girls with all the sex, and you got to get that 1,500-page history of pornography.
I'm working on both of those, but they're on the list for sure.
Yeah. Again, I really appreciated getting the chance to read the Swamp Thing. I like the concept of the Swamp Thing. I like the backstory, however you want to put it, whether it's his original or whether it's the Alan Moore. I like them both. They're fine. I like the stuff that Alan Moore does here with Swamp Thing and like the mystical kind of thing is like, that's cool. I like that. But for this story, I wasn't a huge fan.
Sure.
again, the Justice League stuff is. I'm sure DC told him, "Hey, can you get Justice League in here?
Could have been, yeah.
Help out some sales." I guarantee that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't like that, but the art, it's interesting, but unfinished. It seemed a lot of times. So overall, I'd give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
So it's a positive recommendation, but
Yeah.
barely.
Well, all right. So what's next? Oh, I have to give my number?
Yes.
Well, I already did. Remember, I gave it 2 ratings. I gave it compared to DC Comics of '84. It's
I thought that was just your rating of the writing. What about the art, whole issue?
Oh, the art. Okay, so now I'm just rating the art.
Well, you're rating the entire issue.
Okay. Well, no, that was it. I mean, okay, fine. Let me just break this down here. Okay, as a comic in 2019 compared to everything else, art and story combined, I guess I'll still give it I'll give it a 7.5.
You and these 0.5s. That's got to stop. It's got to stop.
It's not quite an 8, but it's definitely above a 7. So
Larry pulls the same crap on the LCS show. No 0.5s.
No, you know what? I can accept 0.5s. People, when they start getting to like 0.83, 7, like that's
well, what's the difference? Just go 7 or 8. Make a call. Let's go.
7.5.
All right, so that's Swamp Thing. Next week, Mike-DELL.
All right.
We have a guest. I got a guest coming on, and I let him select.
Okay.
And he has chosen Doctor Strange #4.
Ooh.
From 1974.
Really?
I believe the author is Steve Englehart.
Oh, I think so.
I have not.
Exciting.
Now, do you know Doctor Strange? Are you a big fan of the Doctor Strange?
It's funny. Until the movie came out, I'd read maybe 2 issues my whole life, but now I've read a whole bunch of them.
Really? So you like the movie that much? It inspired you?
No, I didn't like the movie at all. I just, I wanted to read some Doctor Strange comics. So
I thought the movie had its moments.
It was okay.
It wasn't great or anything, but it was all right. I am not a huge again, mysticism and magic, just not my thing.
Sure.
But so I don't really know a lot about Doctor Strange, but it'll be interesting to read some Doctor Strange. And it's from 1974. I like 70s comic books best.
Me too. Yeah.
So.
And it's #4. Okay, so and as you can predict, I'm going to read numbers 1 to 3 before I read 4.
Yeah, I will not.
Okay. This is going to be exciting.
But I guess doesn't the cover say something about Doctor Strange meets death or something? Rides with death?
I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
I thought that's what you were doing.
No. I was just excitedly typing this into my schedule.
Oh, Mike-DELL, he's always getting it done. He has to have a schedule.
Oh boy.
Let me check my schedule. Yeah, I'm open from now until, let me see. Oh, death. Yeah. So let me write it down.
Boy. Yeah, here we go. Doctor Strange meets death. You are correct.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow, that's a good pick. I'm excited.
Yeah.
See, and just so you know, Mike-DELL, this is another comic. Like, I was going to pick Doctor Strange by Steve Englehart, but now I don't have to. See, this is great.
If I ever get another pick, because I always have guests because I have a lot of friends, unlike Mike-DELL.
And I don't.
But I'm trying to think. We've never done Iron Man yet, right?
No, we haven't. I don't think so, no. But I have Iron Man on my list too, but hey, you feel free to pick an Iron Man.
Because I don't really know a lot about Iron Man either. Like, I never read Iron Man. But I'm just trying to think of other prominent books we've never done on the show so far. I think we've covered a lot of the big ones.
Yeah, we've only done 1 issue of X-Men.
But at least we did them.
Yeah. We've done 5 Batmans.
Yes. We almost had a 6th one. Thank God he wasn't in their little spaceship.
Yeah.
And Swamp Thing.
Satellite. Anyway.
So, all right. Next week, Doctor Strange.
All right. So I guess that wraps it up then, eh?
Yep.
All right. So this has been Mike, Paul, Dell, and Mike, Paul, L. And
is your middle name really Paul?
Of course it is.
No, it isn't.
Yes, we talked about this on LCS before.
Really?
Yeah, my middle name is Paul.
What the hell?
It's insane. I know. I can't believe it.
It's so weird. All right.
Tell you, man. I think we're secretly from. We used to be on 2 different Earths, and then a crisis happened, and our Earths merged together. That's the only explanation.
I think I'm clearly Earth 2.
Oh yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true.
Earth 2's cooler.
Ooh, sting. All right. Okay, so as we said, until next Tuesday, this has been Flea Market Fantasy.